Every day, the world moves on as it always has. Cities wake up, work begins, and life feels familiar. But beneath that sense of normality, something is shifting. The climate is changing, and the systems we rely on, energy, food, water, cities, finance, are under pressure in ways we're only beginning to understand. These changes don't live in reports or projections, they are already shaping people, livelihoods, and communities. We created the Climate Leadership Podcast so these challenges don't remain abstract or distant, but are explored through the people working inside these systems, making real decisions with real consequences, often without clear answers. This is not a space for fear, blame, or perfection. It's a space for honest conversations about what leadership looks like in a changing world. If you're listening, you're already part of that leadership. Let's begin the conversation.
Welcome to another episode of the Climate Leadership Podcast, where we explore the ideas, technologies, and leadership shaping our climate future. Today, we are discussing one of the most debated topics in the energy transition, nuclear energy and its role in climate action. As countries work to achieve net zero emissions while ensuring reliable and affordable energy, nuclear power continues to generate both strong support and strong opposition. Is nuclear energy an essential climate solution, or is it being overlooked due to public perception and political challenges? To help us explore this topic, I am joined today by Dr. André Wakker. Dr. Wakker has worked across the energy sector for nearly 4 decades, including roles in fossil fuel, renewable energy, hydrogen, and nuclear energy. He is a passionate advocate for nuclear power and has dedicated much of his career to advancing evidence-based discussions on energy and climate. Thank you, Dr. Wakker, for giving us your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so before we begin, may I request you to please share about your climate and energy journey so far?
Yeah, my climate and energy so far is that nuclear is the only option to reduce the CO2 emissions. It's as simple as that. That has everything to do with the very high energy density of nuclear and the availability of nuclear compared to solar and wind and other so-called renewables. And we know that already since 60 years. And if it would have been up to me, if I would have been a politician, I wouldn't have closed any nuclear power plants after Chernobyl. Unfortunately, that happened. But if politicians wouldn't have been that stupid after Chernobyl, we could have had with worldwide in the whole energy mix, we could at least have had today almost 50% nuclear and 50% fossil, whilst the reality of today is that we still have, something like 90% fossil and 10% nuclear and renewables. So that's basically it. And I'm not only advocating nuclear for climate, I'm also advocating because nuclear is the most sustainable we have, and that has everything to do with the ultra high energy density of nuclear. We just need very little fuel, we need very little space, and we generate very, very little waste. So it's basically the best we have and will ever have.
Right. So, Dr. Wakker, can you also share a bit about your professional journey, like how you started into energy sector and what has you been like different roles or experiences which you have gathered over the years?
Oh, right. So I studied nuclear physics a long time ago. And it was very clear to me already when I studied it that nuclear was the solution, period. So I professionally didn't enter nuclear right from the start. I joined Shell in 1987. Basically in chemicals, but in my Shell period, I was already, involved in energy, in all kinds of energy issues. and I basically saw nuclear going down.
Mhm.
When I left Shell around 2000, I started to work again as a team leader for the so-called Energy Center of the Netherlands, which is the center of excellence for energy research, all kinds, also for nuclear. And there I had various roles in hydrogen, in renewable energy, in policies, in technology, always as a team leader. Basically, my last job was there at the nuclear part of ECN, the Energy Research Center of the Netherlands, basically developing new businesses for nuclear in Europe. So I did new builds, I did decommissioning in Germany, I did lifetime extensions, I did waste management, until I became a private at the end of my career, where I did various things amongst nuclear. But basically, I've been exposed to nuclear in depth, and I have been exposed professionally to energy and climate in general. Talk to many climate experts, also at Shell and at ECN in the Netherlands. There were a lot of IPCC members, and I spoke to them and I studied them, and I have my own view on that, which you will probably discuss.
Yes.
So I've experienced a lot, and I talk with authority about this subject.
Right, Dr. Wakker. Like your journey has been from the core of fossil fuel like Shell to the renewable side. So you have experienced everything.
Yeah, and I've seen everything. I've seen all the hypes, hydrogen, and now we have small modular reactors. And I'm still, although I am retired, I'm still very interested and involved actually in the whole topic, and I'm following it closely. As you've probably seen about my, my LinkedIn posts, and I'm still going strong there. So yeah, so let's rock and roll with the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So many governments are investing heavily in solar and wind power.
Yeah.
In your view, why is nuclear energy often excluded from climate discussions, despite being a low carbon energy source?
Yeah. Basically because, I'm talking EU specifically now. The EU institutions, that means Brussels itself, and also universities and all the civil servants, since decades have become far left. And far left basically wants to, I put it very bluntly now on purpose, the far left basically wants to destroy our way of life and wants to destroy human progress. And they have been trying to destroy, they actually been successful actually in destroying nuclear by basically coercing renewables. There is renewables in the EU with ever increasing renewables targets, It started in my time, actually, when I worked for ECN, and I was an advisory to the Dutch government in renewables. The European target was 20%, which was realized specifically by using dirty biomass. And now the target, I believe, is something like 42%, which is crazy, which will not be achieved. But it's all politics. Unfortunately, the left, if I may call it like that, has basically taken power and has basically taken control on a European level. So I'm talking EU now, using these renewables mandates, this renewables coercion to basically push away nuclear and basically replace it with renewables. So it's all politics, and what is behind is not really technology, but it is basically punishing human progress. That's what it's. That's the underlying psychology. We are in the hands of killers. We are not in the hands of builders. So that is basically why nuclear is simply, in the view of far left politicians or even so-called Democrats, is simply too good, and they don't want it. They want something inferior, something which feels good, particularly to women. Particularly women dislike nuclear. And the whole public domain in the EU and also in various countries is becoming more and more dominant by women.
Mhm.
So the whole important scientific argument pro-nuclear, the whole energy density concept, which is true, which nobody debates, is basically pushed off the table.
Let's see.
Yeah, so it's a lot of emotion, it's a lot of psychology, and it's a lot of undercurrents
Mhm.
of destroying Western civilization.
Okay. So, Dr. Walker, public concerns about nuclear accidents continue to influence policy decisions today. How do you respond to people who believe nuclear power is inherently unsafe?
Yeah, you can't. You can't. I did this all my life. And people who are against, let's say, people who basically don't love themselves, and therefore basically want to dismantle the life of others. That's basically how the psychology works. They can't be convinced. People go, if people have a certain belief system, and certainly since the nuclear accident, certainly Chernobyl, with all the images, and all the Greenpeace indoctrination, and the image that nuclear is bad and dangerous has been settled into the lives of people so strongly that facts don't count anymore.
Mhm.
The belief system, like religion, is simply so strong that I can stand on my head and I can come with the very best arguments, but it just doesn't work.
Mhm.
The only true change will come when this so-called energy transition with solar and wind and renewables completely crashes.
Mhm.
And we are actually on the brink of that crash because, well, we might talk about that, but basically you need a very decentralized energy structure, infrastructure, which is totally different from what we had.
Yes.
And we already see today in Germany, particularly, but also in the Netherlands where I lived, we see that actually the grid is basically not capable of accommodating more solar and wind. So the crash has started, and the increasing cost has started, and so I'm afraid that the only way to learn, is the hard way, and that's basically an energy crash, and associated with this an economy crash.
Right. Okay. So, Dr. Walker, I was just thinking to go through with you about this nuclear energy. So, first we build a power plant, nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
So, can you share with me the steps like building, then turning it on, and then getting electricity or energy from it? Can you share this process with me? If
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very simple. A nuclear power plant doesn't really differ very much from a coal power plant.
okay.
Apart from the heat source. The heat source in coal power plant is of course coal.
Mm.
And the coal generates heat, and the heat drives a pressurator, and you get steam basically. And the steam drives a turbine, and that's how you make electricity.
Mhm.
With nuclear, it's basically the same, besides the fact that the heat source is fuel, is uranium or thorium or something else.
Okay.
But because it's a fission process, which has to be controlled and has to be regulated, there's a lot more upfront paperwork required, rightly so, to ensure that the fission process never becomes an uncontrolled process. It shouldn't. The power plant shouldn't become a bomb, right?
Yeah.
and basically there's elementary engineering around that, which is called negative feedback. So every reactor is designed in such a way that it can never become a bomb, right?
Okay.
But that has, of course, be controlled and be regulated. So, and therefore we have the IAEA, you know, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which sets all these rules. Basically, so the steps are first a lot of paperwork. And it's a lot, you know, it's like, it's incredible. And that's basically what takes, well, in the 60s and 70s, it just took a few years. But today, certainly in the West, it takes at least 10, even not maybe more, you know, because the bureaucracy around that it has become basically incredible.
And Dr. Wakker, how about the money, the capital expenditure, capex?
Well, the capex is not really different from coal power plants. Okay, because the let's say the fission part, the nuclear reactor part in a nuclear power plant, I would say is only something like 10 at highest 20% of the capital. The rest is basically concrete and steel, like in any other power plants. So that's not really different. What makes it particularly in the EU and also in the US expensive is the upfront investments you need while not producing electricity. And in the 60s and 70s, in the EU, in Europe, and in the States, there were built, you know, in 20 years' time, there were some 400 nuclear power plants built. Can you follow me? Yeah. And the construction time at that time was 4 to 5 years max. If you look at the very few new build projects in the EU and also in the US, you know, we have Finland, we have France. I think there are two recently new nuclear power plants came online in the States. I don't know precisely where, I forgot the name. Anyway, the construction time today is 10 to 15 years. So imagine that you have you have these capital costs already from the start. You know, it's like building your house, but you can't live in it, but you need to build it. And that makes, you know, if you can follow me, that makes nuclear in the West quite expensive, although the capital cost as such isn't high. Okay, got it. But if you cannot recover the investment quickly, you know, you end up with the cost of rent and the cost of capital. You know, and that makes it, well, expensive. Right. Today. Okay. In the 60s, 70s, it was, and then of course, and you need to build it, and you need to build it at scale. You know, it doesn't make sense what is happening today in the EU. You know, Finland, France, and the UK are building, but it's just one plant of the same design. It's all France EDF technology, right? If you build it here and there, it just doesn't work. In the 60s and 70s, we built these 400 power plants within 20 years. So we built at scale, you know. So you need to scale, you need the project management skills, and you need to build them one after another pretty fast. And then you have the cheapest energy you ever can dream of. That's the whole point. You need the scale to bring the cost down. That is true. Yeah, economies of scale. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we in the West, we don't have that anymore. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Wakker, I was thinking about nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. Yeah. Do we have both type of power plants or no? Sorry, what is your question? What is your question precisely about fission and fusion? The technology which is being used in generating electricity, is it fusion or fission? You mean today?
Yes.
No, it's fission.
So can't we use fusion?
Well, we are trying it, I think, since 100 years or so.
Okay.
And there are a few experimental setups. It's totally different technology.
It's like the sun. It's like the sun generating energy.
Exactly. Fission is basically splitting atoms.
Yeah.
And fusion is joining atoms.
Mhm.
And like the sun, you need, and fission, splitting atoms, it can be done under normal, let's say, earthly conditions, right? Fusion, you need to create, a sun. So under kind of plasma, high temperature, sunlight conditions, and that is extremely difficult. To keep a fusion process going under these very extreme conditions, which put a high demand on materials. And so far, we didn't manage to create, I think, something like a fusion reaction less than 1/10 of a second or something. And that is obviously not enough to create energy.
Okay, so it's ongoing research right now. We don't have any working prototype of it.
Yeah, and on paper it all looks great.
Right.
And I think on paper also from an energy density perspective, again, it's even better than fission.
Okay.
But we need to sort of create sun-like conditions on Earth, and that's damn difficult.
Right. Okay. So moving forward to the end of life of a power plant, towards the end of it, like thinking about circularity or the waste which is generated. So what are your views? How do you dispose of that nuclear waste to be safe?
Yeah, well, there is, first of all, there is not a nuclear waste problem. There's never been a nuclear waste problem.
Okay.
From a health physics perspective, the only thing you need to care about is you shouldn't ingest the stuff in one way or another, and that's all. And it's very little. So all the nuclear waste that has been generated since, well, now I think today 70 years or so worldwide, would fit into one small sports hall. And that is less than any other industry waste or medical waste or God knows what type of waste. Again, because of this energy density thing, it's very, very little. And the technology we know already is there. And the means to do it, that's deep geological repositories. Which basically exist particularly in Sweden and Finland. So it's basically buried in canisters in underground rock, and that's perfectly safe because it will never enter into the environment. Despite what Greenpeace says and blah 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 blah. It's so simple, it's so easy, and again, the energy density makes that it's very, very very little. So regarding the fuel, there is no issue. Then the nuclear power plants, which are old, are already being dismantled. So, well, once you take out the fuel, which ends up in these geological repositories, right?
Yeah.
Already 99.9% of the radiation is gone. And what you are left with is a reactor vessel, so it's metal basically, which is what is called is activated. So it's radioactive for maybe 20 or 30 years. Not highly radioactive, but it radiates. So you need to keep some distance. So what usually happens is that if a nuclear power plant is shut down, basically it sits there for another 20, 30 years.
Okay.
Because of this activated steel. If you want, you can take this activated steel out earlier. But you can also wait for 20, 30 years. And then basically it is very basic dismantling, like you dismantle any power plants. You take the steel out, you can basically blow up the concrete and turn it into a green field. And there are like something like 20 or 30 ex-nuclear power plants, right? Particularly in the US, which are now green fields. So not radioactive, no waste, no contamination of the soil, nothing.
Okay.
Because basically, take out the fuel, and then the danger is gone. Basically, that's the whole point. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Wakker, I was thinking, how do we select a location to build these plants? How far away from the people or population should these be built?
Oh yeah, again, the International Atomic Energy Agency has rules and regulations for that, which already exist since the 60s and 70s. So the locations are based on distance from urban populations, distance from industry. Then of course water, cooling. You need water cooling, so it's either located at the sea or close to a river. So the policy so far has been basically in particularly not dense populated areas, of course. In case something happens, and emissions can happen. That's definitely like Fukushima, and there were emissions from Fukushima, not a lot. No one lost their lives or got ill from the emissions, but there were emissions, right? So, and there are scenarios for what could happen when there are emissions, right? And based on that, the locations are selected, again, under strict rules and regulations. And that's how we have, today, some 450 nuclear power plants.
Okay, so 450 nuclear power plants are currently functional in the world.
Yeah, today, 450.
And can you share, like, are they in Europe, North America, South America, Asia? Where are they?
They are okay. So the number one nuclear country today is still America, with 100 nuclear power plants. Then Europe also today has 100. We had 150, but due to the renewable energy policy and the German nuclear phase out, we have 100 today. Then we have, so in order of magnitude, it's US, then it is Europe or EU, Canada, India, Russia, and I forgot basically China, because if I'm doing it in the right order, I correct it, because today, basically, so it is after EU comes China. So today, China has 50 nuclear power plants, as much as France in the EU, and within less than 5 years' time, China will have more than 100 nuclear power plants. It's already in the construction pipeline.
Right.
So basically, the big picture is, so in the 60s and 70s, US and Europe, and again, and Canada and Russia were big.
Yes.
But relatively, they are shrinking, and China is rising. So basically, I'm talking about, that's interesting, because in around the year 2000, we also had these 450 nuclear power plants. And today we still have 450, but the distribution is different, because in the US and in Europe it has gone down, and that has been compensated by China. And the only country that really builds at scale today is China.
Yes.
Right. So we see a little bit here and there, like, these 4 nuclear power plants in the United Arab Emirates, and Korea does something, and there are lots of nuclear newcomers, but they basically have nothing. So the big picture is that basically since 86, so since Chernobyl, basically worldwide, nuclear has come to a standstill. And even in the Old West, as I call it, in the Old West, it has gone down because of policy and fear-mongering. And only China builds at scale. And that is why we still have these 450 nuclear power plants.
Right.
But today, only China builds at scale. And you read a lot of things about small modular reactors and a new build here or there in the West, but it doesn't compare, and it doesn't come close to what China is doing.
Okay, so they are investing heavily.
Yeah, smart. They are really smart. Yeah. Okay. And of course it's all state controlled, so there is no Greenpeace and there is no opposition, and basically they basically use our technology, add their own technology to it. They produce engineers at a scale that we don't compare with here in the EU, and certainly not in the US, and they are pretty damn good engineers. Basically what we in the West, in the Old West, as I call it, did in the 60s and 70s is now happening in China.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So, Dr. Wakker, I was thinking media plays a big role when it comes to nuclear energy.
Yeah.
So media shows that, first of all, it is very expensive. Yeah. Then they show it's very challenging to contain if anything goes wrong. And finally, they say where to dispose of this material, this fission material.
Yeah.
So they created bottlenecks in the whole supply chain of this process.
Yeah.
How do you deal with this? Because that is the reason why nuclear energy is going down.
Yeah. Well, the mainstream media in the West are liars. And there is unfortunately no independent journalism anymore. Also, basically they copycat what the politicians tell them to say. And it's it's the decline of independent journalism is another aspect of the downfall of our civilization. And they are doing this since decades, and it's quite interesting. I was when I was still professionally active in nuclear at the Energy Research Center of the Netherlands, and I was advisor to the Dutch government on renewable energy, and I predicted all the problems that exist today anyway. But it is all put under the table. In my early days, I'm talking at least 20 years ago, because I was a kind of official person, right? The mainstream media, invited me for interviews, and I had these discussions many times until basically I was banned due to pressure from politics. And that is obvious, and the same happens with the BBC. BBC is well, I don't follow the BBC, but I follow criticasters of the BBC on social media platforms. If you want to get good information, don't listen to the BBC. Go to the social media. But can you do anything about it? No, you can't. Well, to put it strong, I was basically cancelled. Not with consequences for myself, but I think with my background in science and all I experience, I think I am much more interesting than anyone else, with a balanced view, and I know all the facts, and I can talk about it as well. But I'm a danger, I'm dangerous. So that's how it works. And can we do something about it? Well, I make these shows: stop paying your taxes and stop paying the BBC. But it's not easy to stop paying your taxes. But that's the only way to get them on their knees, you know. But yeah, I don't know.
So, Dr. Walker, let's think about the future. Do you think nuclear energy has a space in the future?
Oh yeah, no, I think that, you know, I spoke about you know, if Chernobyl didn't happen and if our politicians wouldn't have been that stupid to stop nuclear, basically, we could have had 50% in the whole worldwide energy mix nuclear by today. And you know, the power shift. You know, we talked about China. There's a big power shift in the world. You know, the West isn't in control anymore. You know, and basically the West is basically committing suicide, to put it bluntly. China and other countries are not committing suicide; they are growing. And you know, the science, the reality is that nuclear is simply the very best that we have. Period. Because of sustainability, energy density, the whole chain. If you look at it, nuclear is the very best. So at the end, the truth will come out. So what will happen is that energy well, let's talk Europe. In America, we have Trump. It's a bit different, but okay. We will see a big energy crisis, and you know, it's already happening right now. And then, you know, it will take at least decades before nuclear comes back at scale in the EU. But it will happen, and renewables will simply disappear. So I think that you know, long-term view, the end state, if I may say so, the end state of the so-called energy transition is largely nuclear. So by the end of this century, we will have at least 50% in our whole energy mix. I'm not talking electricity, I'm also talking energy as a whole, right? Okay. We will have at least 50% nuclear worldwide, if not more.
Okay. And Dr. Wakker, what about the Paris Agreement goals, net zero by 2050? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, you know, that is already crashing. Because it, you know, net zero in 2050 is basically suicide. So is that a problem? No, because of course, yes, there is climate change. You know, there is more CO2 in the air, and it's fossil CO2. If I may, the brief summary is yes, of course. There is fossil CO2 in the air, and that makes the world hotter, right? And that is, you know, there is no scientist that would disagree with that. The disagreement about is that a real problem or not, you know? And if you just look, no, not emotionally, but you look at what happens. What really happens is you say, okay, yeah, well, it gets a bit hotter. On average, it's 1 or 2 degrees hotter. You know, like we are sitting now. Probably, you know, the summers take longer and there are peaks. Is that a problem? No, it's not. Because thanks to 200 years of human progress, you know, we have air conditioning and we are healthy and we have technology you know, so we can adapt. So, you know, we will adapt and you know, and we will manage our rivers and we will manage the sea. But is there a climate catastrophe? No, there isn't. And there won't be. So net zero will drop. Net zero will disappear silently. You know, there will not be a big drama. And the IPCC conferences, they will just continue. But net zero will disappear. Okay. Right? So we have time, basically. That is my message. Yet, fossil comes to an end. There is no, you know, we shouldn't use coal because coal, apart from the CO2 climate thing, coal is dirty and dangerous, you know, and air pollution, and coal basically kills people, not by CO2, but because of the other coal emissions and smog and all that. London. But there's plenty coal, but oil will be gone and gas will be gone. So the end of fossil, which is real, that will actually accelerate, the energy transition. And then, basically, technically, the bottom line is, renewables don't work because it's all too low energy density, system complexity won't work. So the only thing that works that we have, and we know that since 60, 70 years, is nuclear. So net zero 2050, forget it. Yet energy transition from fossil straight to nuclear is needed, not for the climate, but basically because of the end of fossil. And we shouldn't have had coal in the first place, right? And that will drive a much slower transition towards nuclear, which in my view will result in at least 50% nuclear in the energy mix by the end of this century.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Wakker, for sharing your insights and perspective today. This conversation highlights that achieving climate goals requires honest discussion about available energy solutions. Whether people support or oppose nuclear energy, it remains an important part of the global debate on how we deliver reliable, affordable, and low carbon energy for future generations. Thank you for joining us on the Climate Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network. See you in the next episode. Until next time, take care and have a nice day. Bye bye.